Tai sveiki susirinkę į rimtąją dalį. Pradėsime pranešimų sesiją. Ir pirmas pranešimas, kaip ir numatyta programoje, yra profesorės Hanna Suchockos. Ji buvo...
So now we get serious, and the first presentation, as was in the program, is by Professor Hanna Suchocka.
Pranešimas pats yra apie konstituciją, konstitucinę tapatybę ir... Girdisi? Ir valstybę.
The presentation itself is about the constitution and constitutional identity and the state.
Ir todėl svarbu, man atrodo, pradėti nuo to, kad profesorė buvo premjerė Lenkijos 92-93 metais, kai visi šitie klausimai buvo sprendžiami.
And so I think it's important to remind you that Professor Suchocka was the Prime Minister of the state of Poland in 1992-93, when all those issues were being resolved.
Taip pat nuo 97 iki 2000 buvo teisingumo ministrė.
And she was also the Minister of Justice from 1997 to 2000.
Todėl linkiu įdomaus pranešimo ir taip pat kviečiu galvoti klausimus, nes man atrodo, tai yra labai gera galimybė pagalvoti apie tai, kas vyko ir vyksta Lenkijoje iki šiol.
So I invite you to listen to the presentation and also to think of interesting questions, because I believe that it's a great opportunity to hash out what was and is happening in Poland.
Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I don't know, it worked? Well, yes, you can hear me, I hope. Thank you for the program, because exactly I was not so sure how it... Okay. So thank you for the invitation. I am happy finally to be here, because I never realized that the way from Poland, Poznań to Nida is so long. It's much longer than flying to Chicago for me, because I spent yesterday about 14 hours in trip, and I arrived after midnight to Nida. So I think that the next time I have to take a car and driving directly from Poland by car instead of going by plane to Warsaw, then from Warsaw to Riga, then from Riga 6 hours by car in the night to Nida. So now I have such an impression that Nida is so far from Poland, but it is exactly very close to the Polish border, much closer than my trip was. So, but finally everything is okay. We have a sunny day and a very nice group, and I am the first who will start with the discussion. You know, it is for me always very difficult when I have to speak to the audience. I don't know who are you, yes, because when I have my students, I know, yes, there are students of law, there are specialists in law, but now, as I can realize, there are representatives of different professions, and probably lawyers and specialists in law are in minority here in this group, yes? I am not so sure, probably. So maybe my text is not just very good for this presentation, but of course I am open to discuss with you also some other issues, I don't know, concerning the role of the Constitution. I decided, because when I read that the title of the seventh forum is Breaks of the European Identity. So for that reason, I decided to say something of a very specific issue, which is constitutional identity. And as I said, as I have written in my text, that it is a concept which now is under a very, very strong discussion. And so I entitled my presentation in this way that I said that is the changing concept of the idea of constitutional identity. Maybe I have to put the interrogative point. It is a changing concept or not, but maybe we can discuss this during this session. And the concept constitutional identity is not new one, because it appeared in the discussion on the constitution since the beginning of the transformation, when all our countries started to make new constitution. As it has been mentioned shortly, I was exactly involved in the constitutional work, constitutional making process since the beginning of transformation, because I was elected to the Polish parliament in 1989. I think that many of yours were not born at that time, yes, but I was just acting to make the constitution. And then I was among the rapporteurs who presented the amendment to the constitution on December 1989 to the Polish constitution. Then I was for many years a member of the Constitutional Commission, and since the beginning I also became a member of the Venice Commission. And Venice Commission is also very well known here, especially for lawyers. Then I was also involved in many issues concerning the amendments to the Constitution, notion of the Constitution, and the role of the Constitution in the country. So for that reason, I can say that in the beginning of the transformation, the beginning of 90s, I think that the situation was very difficult, but even to some extent easier than today, yes? Because we had then one goal, yes? We would like to be, this has been very often called, back to Europe, because we all felt Europeans. We were Europeans, yes, you Lithuanians, we in Poland, and living under the Soviet empire, as I used to say, it was not our, how to say, goal, and it was not even our historical background. Yes, we are completely different values. So for that reason, we would like to adopt our new constitutions, or to make amendments to the constitutions based on the new axiology towards the Soviet axiology, because we would like to build our constitution on the traditional, we can say, European axiology, because we always felt that we belonged to the European culture. Then I think it was for all of us much more simple to decide that now we have changed the rules and principles, constitutional principles typical for the Soviet system, and instead to include to the constitution the traditional principles, like the rule of law, separation of powers, independence of the judiciary, the pillars of the European system of constitutionalism. It was quite, as I said, quite easy. And in that sense, it was for us clear that making this change, making this amendment to the Constitution, we also create our own constitutional identity. It is our Constitution done by us, and we would like to have such a principle in the Constitution. Many of the amendments were adopted later in the referendum in some countries, in some not, but were accepted by society. We exactly looked for the sources of our constitutional identity, as I said, in our tradition, the country's tradition, but also in the principles. They were rooted in the historical background of the European identity. So it was exactly the first step we had to do. Then the problem was how we can, and now probably it's the problem, because in the beginning we we're not so aware of this constitutional identity because, as I said, we put some general principle and we are sure that it created us as rooted in the European tradition. But then the discussion started. What exactly does mean the constitutional identity? It is a constitutional identity, which means that it is something which is, how to say, against the European identity, or it is rooted in European identity. It was a kind of evolution which was exactly very strongly pointed out in the around 2010. Earlier was not so strong. It was in the situation when Hungary started to change its constitution. But then we'll discuss on it a little later. But first of all, we have also to define, to try to describe what does mean the constitutional identity. As I have written in my text, that sometimes the constitutional identity is associated with the concept constitutional core, which should be included to the constitution. This is the constitutional minimum. But in my opinion, it is not the same. Constitutional minimum and constitutional identity is not the same. To some extent, it could be, how to say, in some point common, but it's not exactly the same. So I found a quite good definition of Professor Granat, who was also a judge in the Constitutional Court in Poland, who wrote that by constitutional identity, we usually mean a set of principles and values that are particularly valuable from the point of view of the state and the nation, and which should remain constant. So I think that it is exactly the definition we can use as we define the constitutional identity. They are based on or refer to a specific axiological foundation worthy of protection, and thus constituting, in this understanding of the legislator, the basis of the constitutional order. So, as I said, the constitutional identity we can understand as a set of rules which are included to the constitution, but based on the axiological values which are shared by society, by nation. I would like strongly pointed here that not only by one ruling party, as it was in communist system, but by nation. Yes, much wider notion of axiological system, axiological values. It is also not so easy in practice to describe, because we can observe in political life and in everyday discussion how the representatives of different political parties are divided, defining the axiological principle, but the core of the axiology could be shared. But this is a point for the further discussion. As I said, to base the constitution and to see the constitution as a constitutional values and constitutional identity, the axiology must be shared, as I said, by wider society, not only by one group or by one party. It must be based on objective values. And then it's a question, when we have such a moment that we had to change this, the value, when we can redefine the constitutional identity. And as I am writing in my paper, you have it in your hand, it's sometimes in the country something changed, as it was in the beginning of 90s, and then it's clear for everybody that the axiological system existing till now is not longer value, is not longer accepted by society, that it should be changed. It is then the constitutional moment, which was so well described by Bruce Ackerman, who said that sometimes the society and the state found itself in such a situation that the rules existing now are not longer valid, should be changed, yes, sometimes even without amending the constitution, but by making different interpretation of the constitution. By this definition was based on American system, when we know the constitution is rather very stable, and the amendments, so-called amendments change, are a majority done by the interpretation of the Supreme Court. But as we can agree, in the beginning of 90s, in all post-Soviet countries, especially Central and Eastern European countries, we found ourselves in such a point that we had a kind of constitutional moment. We had to change constitution, and it was a time for the new definition of constitutional identity. And I would like to repeat again, because I said in the beginning, but again, that the constitutional identity should be defined on the values which are typical for the tradition of given country, and also for the rules which are typical for European constitutional system. And I think that in all our countries, we, in the process of making constitution, we exactly use taking into account the two sources for making constitution. In our process, I can say in Poland, when we make the first amendment of the constitution, because first we decided to make amendments to the constitution in December 89. First of all, we decided to reject all the principles that were completely not common for our tradition. For example, the ruling role of one party, and then the politicization of the judiciary, which was based on the ruling role of one party. And then, for that reason, we were back to our tradition we had in our two constitutions before the Second World War. It was also the Lithuanian exams, because you also had your constitution. So it was the tradition typical for our country. But then we also looked for the solution existing in other countries, like, for example, the British system, parliamentary British system, United States system, presidential system, and different. And we're looking for the elements which are much more typical for our tradition, for how to say, our thinking on the constitution. And then we created new constitution with new identity. And it was our identity based on the two, how to say, bases. But everything, as I said, was built and was discussed and was amended to bring us closer to the united Europe, because it was our aim from the beginning. Yes, we all would like to be member of the European institution, European organizations. And first of all, we became members of the Council of Europe. The Council of Europe was the first international European body. We would like to be there to share the values which were rooted in the European Convention on Human Rights. And it was our first goal. And of course, our constitution, we have to build our constitution to be in line with the general rules which are included into the European Convention on Human Rights and the values of the Council of Europe. And it was the how to say, condition sine qua non, we should not enter to the Council of Europe. All our countries, and especially both countries, Lithuania and Poland, we agreed for the general principles of the European Convention on Human Rights, and also both our countries decided to become member of the Venice Commission. I will mention Venice Commission several times here because it is an important body for creating a certain atmosphere, for making exactly a constitution in different countries in line with the European values and European axiology. And as it has been very pointedly, very rightly pointed out by then the Secretary General of the Venice Commission, who said that never before, he is writing on the beginning of 90s, never before had states been so open and so even willing to draw on constitutional principles and solutions from outside in order to allow them to return to the family of European democratic states to which, after all, they had belonged before. It was, as I said, that for that reason, we, our countries, decided to join the Venice Commission to receive from the Venice Commission a kind of advice. How we can make amendments to the Constitution to be in line with European values, not neglecting our traditional values, because it is always the very important component, yes? How to put together our tradition, our values when we were educated, rooted with the European. And to some extent, there was no contradiction between two values. In many cases, was no contradiction, but it started later on, I can say. But still in 2005, the Polish Constitutional Tribunal stating that the Constitution of the Republic of Poland and community law are based on the same set of common values determining the nature of a democratic state of law and the catalogue and content of fundamental rights. In fact, it was then said, the unions, it was used, of course, of the European Union when we entering to the European, in the beginning of 90s, it was not union, but it was the community. But the union's identity is a function of the constitutional identities of individual member states. So it was always everything done in common. But then, at the certain point, we noticed, we could observe that some countries try to start to use the term constitutional identity as a term against European identity. It was the point, as I said, in the around 2010, when Hungary started to make amendments to the constitution. And then after so many years, since the beginning of 90s till about 2010, when it was such a strong, how to say, concordance between individual axiology and values of individual countries with European values, suddenly some countries, some political parties try to use the term identity, as I said, as a term which could be argued against European values and role of the European institution. It started about 10, 14 years ago, but it is still the big problem we have now in many countries. I don't say that in all countries, but in many countries. And in this case, I usually quote the very important paper of Dr. Jóźwicki. He's a young scientist from our university, and he pointed out that the path of constitutional identity from an object of friendly interest in both legal doctrine and jurisprudence, both, so it means countries and European, to its status as a source of crisis for European Union constitutionalism was relatively short. Because exactly, we started with a very friendly interpretation, and then finally now we are in a very, very difficult point when we discuss what exactly constitutional identity means. And I can say that it is a very difficult discussion. It was, and it still is, a very difficult discussion, especially in Poland. I think that in Lithuania, you don't have probably such a strong discussion against European Union as we have. I can, of course, analyze it also from the point of view of my work in the Venice Commission, because I see what countries are under stronger control of the Venice Commission and which countries are not so strongly controlled. And Lithuania belongs to the country which are rather relatively far from the Venice Commission. And Poland, till 2015, was never a client of the Venice Commission, but since 2016, Poland became a client very often. Now I see many opinions of the Venice Commission for Poland, to Poland exactly, based on the different initiatives. So it showed that maybe not suddenly, but after a certain period of time, we started to change the notion of constitutional identity as something common to something which could be used as a weapon against the European Union. How we can define what are the main issue and how we can now discuss on the constitutional identity. I am always of the opinion, it is my point of view, and I always present this point of view, that there are some, of course, questions, some problems, maybe some issues, some values, which should be treated individually by different countries, because belong to our tradition. In my opinion, but it's not only my opinion, such problematic is, for example, the problems of marriage, of the family law. It is a very specific problem, which probably should be treated, maybe you don't agree with it, should be treated in the individual countries in an individual way. In my opinion, it would be very difficult to find the common principle for all countries concerning the family law. We can observe now also the very strong discussion in Poland, yes, concerning the issue, but not only in Poland, in all countries where we trying to use the definition of marriage, definition of abortion, etc., it always involves a lot of work. So I think, I am of the opinion that this issue should be exactly left to the solution on national level. But there are pillars which should be, common, and which should never be left only to the individual countries. Like, for example, independence of the judiciary. Independence of the judiciary is a core, pillar for guaranteeing all human rights. So in the situation when we'll have a very specific, I can say, a judicial solution in different countries. What I mean specific is that in one country it would be much more dependent to the political party, in other countries no, then the whole European system is completely collapsed. So here we have to be very coherent, and it should be clearly defined that when we discuss on the role of judiciary, the notion, the principle of independence of judiciary belongs exactly to the European common value, and it should share by all countries. It is one of the values, one of the axiological strongest point which should be respected in all countries. And here we have to find the one common European standard. And it has been done by Venice Commission. It is even done, I can say, since the beginning. The Venice Commission is always looking for the common European standard concerning judiciary. How we can solve the issue, how we can organize the issue. And what is the core, how we can define the core issues for independence of judiciary, and what are the organizational issues? Because organizational issue could be treated differently in different countries. But the core, what define independence of judge, independence of judiciary, impartiality of judiciary should be a common standard and created on common values. And now in many countries, and especially I can mention the countries because still making different opinions of the Venice Commission, I feel that we have a problem of definition of independence of judiciary in Ukraine, in Moldova, Albania, Poland, in many countries, yes, because some countries are looking for a specific element belonging to the culture of the country, which is not in line with the European Union. One of such elements which belongs to the culture of the country is, for example, a very high corruption. And we cannot accept that in the rules which are defined in some documents of different countries, they use that in the independent judiciary we have to take into account the European standards, but also our local tradition. When local tradition is based on corruption, the local tradition could not be, of course, a kind of the rules for defining the independence of judiciary, and it could not be seen as an element who describe the constitutional identity. So, as I said, the constitutional identity is exactly very, very difficult to be defined in a very precise way, to take into account all the very complicated elements which are around. And here, when we discuss also on the constitutional identity, one of the problems is who can finally define whether the constitutional identity was broken in a given country by passing such a law or not. And here we have now the permanent discussion between European Court of Human Rights, but especially with the European Tribunal in Luxembourg, in Poland, how we can define the last word of the court in making interpretation of the Constitution. It involves a lot of scientists, lawyers, constitutional lawyers, which try to define the constitutional identity and the role of constitutional court in the given country and the role of European Tribunal of Justice, how to interpret the Constitution and who has the last word in defining that no, it does not belong to the constitutional identity or it belongs to the constitutional identity. So many authorities like Judge Joseph Weiler and specialists in international and European law try to find the solution and try to define also the separation of roles for both tribunals, not to enter too deeply into the territory of the country, but on the other side, to keep the line, yes, of the European values. And then you maybe remember it was a very famous judgment done by Karlsruhe Court in Germany, which also puts the question concerning the identity and the certain equilibrium between both courts, between national courts and the European courts, and then where the concept of rule of law and constitutional identity are competing on complementary values. It is still, how to say, a very hot discussion. who has the ultimate authority to define that the limits, or maybe that the rules of law in the given country has been broken. I put the question in my text. You can find it. So, knowing that you have the text, I make rather a comment to the text instead of reading it, because it could be much more boring than saying something what is also a problem. What is also a problem for me. I can say that now exactly when we are making the opinion of the Venice Commission. We have to enter much deeper into the different notion, delicacy of a different notion than it was in the beginning of 90s. As I said, it was much more simple, and now, as we usually said, the devil lies in the details. Yes, and now we have to discuss on details where such solution is exactly solution in national legislation which had broken the European law, and where it is still possible. Yes, it is a law because it is based on our national tradition. The limits sometimes are exactly, the border are exactly sometimes very delicate and very difficult to be clearly defined. For that reason, we have now such a strong discussion and even tensions between Constitutional Court, for example, in Poland, and the European Court Justice in Luxembourg. Who can finally decide what is the final solution? And in the discussion, it was in the discussion between different professors of law and judges. They tried to create such an institution like the solution of last word or solution of a common word. What does it mean? It does mean that we should not, in such a complicated situation, to look only for last word, or to say that this institution has a last word. No, we have to find a common solution. So it should be how to say done. Maybe not discussion, but looking for the solution on national level and on European level so far that finally we'll be able to find common solution. Taking into account the difficulties we have now in different countries, not only the so-called new democracies, but also in old democracy like Germany, with the Constitutional Tribunal in Karlsruhe, Joseph Weiler proposed to create maybe a certain chamber over the existing courts, which could help to find the solution. Of course, it is only one of the proposals not accepted by everybody, but it is one of the proposals which maybe in the future should be taken into account to guarantee better to find the common word instead of last word of one of the courts, which finally could block everything and could completely block the cooperations between local courts and European courts. So, as I said, that the concept of constitutional identity cannot be interpreted in such a way that national constitutions becomes instruments that allow member states to avoid community law in certain areas, especially, as I said, such as judicial independence, the rule of law, because it is a, how to say, basis for the whole structure of the European system. And then when we will have here a different system, as I said, everything would be collapsed. And just speaking of the changing function of constitutional identity, I formulate this thesis on the basis of observation of the behavior of individual states and especially their courts with regard to EU law. And summing up, I think that when we were, following this way, we can completely create or make the system which will not be functional and which will be a system full of tension and not giving good guarantees for the rule of law and judicial independence guarantee of human rights. And it is the last acapit in my text that the important is mutual loyalty of the member state and the union. They form the effect of which should be the search for the common word and not for the last word. The loyal cooperation between different organs, but also between states, is one of the rules which can create, which was a basis for creating a united Europe. And when we completely, reject this principle, then what we have nothing in the hands. So I think that we are exactly in a difficult moment, but as it happens several times in our history, we were able to find a solution. So I think that now we also will be able to find a solution to keep our constitutional identity with some solutions, but also not taking it as an emblemat contra European Union, contra European Union values. So I think that it's time for me, because I had exactly a lecture, 45 minutes, and now I think it's time for you. I am not so sure, I would like to say, if I would be able to answer all your questions, because I have still more interrogative points and questions than answers, but we can try together, maybe find something which would be very fruitful for the future. Thank you. Not yet ended.
Man lietuviškai, ne? Užduoti klausimą.
It's a very pity for me, sorry, that I can't understand Lithuanians. Yes, I am sitting.
That's why I'm here.
No, yes, but it would be better to understand some words. Yes,
it would be.
But your language is so difficult. Yes, we are so close, but the language is so difficult. When I go to Ukraine, I can understand Ukrainians. Yes, but here nothing. Yes, sorry.
That's okay. Aš ateinu iš politikos mokslų.
I'm coming here, or my background is political science.
Ir dėl to turiu labai daug politologinių klausimų.
And so I have plenty of political science questions.
Ir norėčiau pradėti nuo tokio gal provokacinio klausimo.
And I would like to begin with something, with a little bit of a provocation, maybe.
Jūs savo pranešime sakėte, kad pradžioje nebuvo, nerandu lietuviško žodžio, contradiction, prieštaravimo tarp nacionalinių tradicinių vertybių ir europietiškų vertybių.
In your presentation, you said that at the beginning there was no contradiction between the national traditional values and the European values.
Bulgarų politologas Ivanas Krastevas sako, kad rytų Europa, įskaitant Lenkiją, ilgą laiką tiesiog užsiėmė mimikriją.
The Bulgarian political scientist Ivan Krastev says that for a long time Eastern Europe was basically engaged in mimicry.
Kitaip sakant, Rytų Europa ėjo su didžiulė meilė į Europą, nežinodama, kas ta Europa iš tikrųjų yra.
In other words, that Eastern Europe was walking ahead into the greater Europe with big love and great enthusiasm, but without clear knowledge what Europe actually is.
Ir dar daugiau, ar nėra taip, kad 90-aisiais tokie principai kaip teisės viršenybė, demokratija, pluralizmas buvo tik tai principai ant popieriaus.
And furthermore, is it possible to say that in the 90s, you said? In the 90s, the big principles like rule of law and democracy and pluralism were nothing but principles on paper.
Mano platus klausimas yra toks, ar nebuvo prieštaravimų nuo pat pradžių?
So that's my broad question. Is it really true that there were no contradictions from the very beginning?
Mm-hmm. I tried to write your questions. So, okay, it is always a question, as you know. Being a lawyer, you always look for the interpretation. Yes, how you can interpret it. And now,
sorry. Kaip žinot, teisininkams visą laiką klausimas yra interpretacijos. Kaip teisininkas visą laiką ieškai, ką interpretuoti.
And now is a question how we can interpret, as you said, that there was no contradiction. Yes, no contradiction. What does mean? Yes.
Tai dabar yra klausimas, kaip reikėtų interpretuoti tai, kad nebuvo prieštaravimų.
I would like to say that it was no contradiction in this sense that we would like to be back in Europe, yes? It was the very general title, I can say, a kind of myth, building myth, yes, in that time. Back to Europe, yes?
Aš interpretuočiau taip, kad prieštaravimo nebuvo ta prasme, kad mes labai norėjom grįžti į Europą. Ir tai buvo toksai labai bendras, miglotas ir labai platus mitas grįžimo į Europą.
And here was no contradiction, and in this way, probably, we said, okay, all details we will discuss later, but now the common goal is to be in Europe, yes?
Ir čia tikriausiai prieštaravimo nebuvo ta prasme, kad buvo tokia nuostata, visas smulkmenas aptarsim vėliau, o dabar bendras didelis tikslas yra grįžti į Europą.
And I can say that we, in the first stage, we didn't reject our values, but we put it aside, yes? That we discussed later.
Ir aš sakyčiau, kad mes savo vertybių neatmetėm, bet atidėjom į šalį, kaip tokias, kurias reikės aptarti vėliau.
And you are correctly right when you said, I didn't touch the issue, that in that period we had probably two different notions of Europe. Because Europe in the beginning of 90s was something else than we had in our imagination, yes?
Ir jūs turbūt teisingai pastebite tą prieštaravimą pačioj pradžioj, kad Europa buvo, mūsų įsivaizduojama Europa, buvo toks vaizduotės kūrinys.
Because I wrote in my several books that when we started our way back to Europe, we still had in our imagination the Europe before the Second World War, just after the Second World War, yes. But in the meantime, the Europe has developed completely, and it became a completely different structure than we kept in our memory.
Ir aš keliose knygose esu rašiusi, kad mes likom su tokiu Europos vaizdiniu ar prisiminimu, kokia ji buvo prieš Antrąjį pasaulinį karą arba iškart po jo. Nors iš tikrųjų per tą laiką Europa vystėsi ir labai nutolo nuo to, ką mes išlaikėme prisiminimuose.
Yes, because Europe became much more united, and the unification was based also on different ground, not only the classical values, but also on the strongly economic cooperation. And we are far away from this kind of thinking on Europe, yes?
Ir per tą laiką Europa susivienijo remdamasi ne tik tomis mūsų prisimenamomis vertybėmis, bet ir tokiais dalykais, apie kuriuos mes buvom visai nepratę galvoti, kaip labai stipri ekonominė integracija.
Yes, but it was also the first. I would like to follow your question because you put very broad question. As I said, answer is probably much broader. And in the beginning, when we decided to be back in Europe, we expected. I use the term all post-Soviet countries, especially here, yes, Baltic states, Poland, Hungary, Czech Republic. We expected that we are welcome cordially in Europe, yes, but it was not the case, yes.
Ir čia, kadangi klausimas labai platus, tai turbūt ir neatsakysime iki galo, bet man atrodo, kad 10-ajam dešimtmetį šitos, kaip čia, Rytų Europos šalis, Lenkija, Baltijos šalis ir Vengrija tikėjosi ar turėjo lūkestį būti širdingai ir, džiaugsmingai pasitiktos Europoje, nors iš tikrųjų taip nebuvo.
Yes, and it was our first disappointment. For example, our disappointment. And it was the first, for example, maybe the Poland, yes, because we created the first non-communist government in 1989. And we expected that in this situation, we will be accepted in Europe very quickly. But it has not happened, yes?
Ir mes tuo labai nusivylėm ir čia Lenkija gali būti geras pavyzdys, nes pirmoji sukūrė nepriklausomą posovietinę vyriausybę ir tikėjosi būti labai greitai priimta ir pasitikta Europoje, bet to nenutiko.
And so I would like to answer your question that showing that exactly our knowledge what Europe is was exactly very limited in that time. It was based on our traditional vision of Europe.
Tai atsakant, dar kartą grįžtant prie klausimo, tai mūsų Europos įsivaizdavimas buvo labai ribotas ir buvo pagristas mūsų tradiciniu Europos vaizdiniu.
And for that reason, as you also said, we agreed for certain rules, but the rules were not in the beginning deeply defined, yes? When we started to define the rules, like for example, rule of law, as I said, being always big democracy, independence of judiciary, we notice that there is a big, maybe not big, but there are differences in the interpretations, yes?
Ir mes priėmėme taisyklės, bet jos iš pradžių nebuvo smulkiai apibrėžtos. Ir kai pradėjom jas apibrėžinėti, tokius dalykus kaip teisės viršenybė, ar teismų nepriklausomybė, ar demokratija, tai labai greitai pasirodė, kad interpretacijos gali smarkiai skirtis.
Yes, for example, then I give floor to you, in December 1989 in Poland, we amended our constitution and we included to the constitution the principles of the rule of law, yes? It is the principle of the rule of law we didn't have in our previous constitution because we would like to be rooted in the European system. But it was only, as I said, the beginning, because it was only the door, and then we had to open the door, and it was exactly a big room of problems.
1989 metų gruodį į Lenkijos konstituciją buvo įtrauktas straipsnis apie teisės viršenybę, kurio iki tol nebuvo. Buvo, reiškia, pataisyta konstitucija. Ir mes norėjom tą pataisą padaryti, tam, kad norėjom priimti, reiškia, europietišką tvarką, būti europiečiai. Bet iš tikrųjų tai buvo tik tai tokios atvertos durys, pro kurias tada reikėjo pradėti iš tikrųjų aiškintis, ką tai reiškia ir kas tai yra.
Aš irgi taip pat galvoju.
I think the same.
Bet aš tuomet turiu kitą klausimą. Tai kas nutinka apie 2010 ir 2015 metus?
But then I have another question. So what is it precisely that happens around 2010 and 2015?
Vengrijoje ir Lenkijoje.
In Hungary and Poland.
Ir ar iš tikrųjų tai yra tik teisinės kolizijos problemos, ar tai yra, kad politika grįžta smarkiau į valstybės?
And are they really just problems of legal collision? Or is it also the matter that politics is returning more fiercely into the mechanism of the state?
I don't know what do you understand by mechanism of the state. I don't know what how we can define.
Tai vienas iš neva atsakymų, kodėl teisė yra pasitelkiama politikoje, yra, kad politika buvo taip suteisinta, kad politiką reikia grąžinti į jos vietą.
Vienas iš atsakymų, kodėl kas teisė su politika?
Teisė, taip. Kai yra diskutuojama, kodėl reikia visų šitų principų arba pokyčių arba konstitucinio teismo reformų, yra teikiamas principas, kad politika buvo suteisinta.
Teisė su politika ar politikos teisinė?
Kad politika išimta iš politikos ir kad dominuoja teisiniai principai, kad valdo teisė, ne politika.
How I can understand it.
No, I didn't understand her either. One of the observations when discussing constitutional reforms or need for constitutional reforms and so on is that law is dominating over politics, basically, that legal principles have taken over and there's not enough space, basically, for politics to function as politics.
Yes, I think that I can understand, yes, what you said. So it is exactly the problem which could be named the politicization of the constitution. Yes, politicization of the constitution. Constitution is always a political instrument, yes, but it is a political, but on the other side, a legal instrument. And the politicians should be subordinated to the constitution, not otherwise. When politicians would like to be over the constitution, then we have the collapse of the constitutionalism.
Būtent tokia yra problema, kurią būtų galima pavadinti konstitucijos supolitinimu, nes konstitucija visada yra politinis dokumentas, bet politikai turėtų būti pavaldų, bet taip pat ir teisinis dokumentas, ir politikai turėtų būti pavaldus teisei konstitucijoje. Ir kai tas, tai problema ir yra tada, kai tas apsiverčia aukštyn kojom, kai pradedama konstituciją naudoti kaip politinis įrankis.
And you know, it was usually when I discuss and I try to answer the question, yes, politics and constitution, political and constitution, I always read again and again the speech of Pope Benedict XVI. He delivered the speech in Bundestag in Germany.
Aš, kai aptarinėju tą konstitucijos ir politikos problemą, tai vis iš naujo prisimenu popiežiaus Benedikto XVI kalbą pasakytą Vokietijos Bundestage.
Yes, and his speech was entitled, now I would like to find the real title, but it was something like the rule of law and politics, something like that. It was exactly the speech of Benedict XVI.
Ir jo kalba, aš norėčiau prisiminti tikslų pavadinimą, bet apytikriai vadinosi teisės viršenybė ir politika. Ir jinai kaip tik buvo apie tai.
And he said very clearly that we, as a Germany, we know what does mean when law is subordinated to politicians.
Ir jisai sakė kaip tik, kad mes kaip vokiečiai gerai žinom, kas nutinka, kai teisė yra pavaldi politikai ar subordinuota politikai.
Yes, and so here, as you put the question, Pope also tried to answer your question, that when politicians would like to manipulate the constitution, then exactly we have completely destroyed the rule of law system in the country.
Taigi popiežius irgi mėgino atsakyti į jūsų klausimą ir jisai sakė, kad kai pajungiame konstituciją politiką arba kai politikai ima naudotis konstituciją politiniais tikslais, tai tada ir žlunga visa valstybė.
And you know what has happened, you put the question between 2010 and 15 in both countries, yes, which were both the countries were on the first line and fighting for democracy and the rule of law in the 90s, yes, and then something happened.
Ir jūs klausėte, kas nutiko tarp 2010 ir 2015 abiejose tose šalyse, kurios lygi tol nuo pat 10-ojo dešimtmečio buvo pirmose gretose kovos už teisės viršenybę.
And I think that the process was similar in Hungary and Poland, because the political leader then, Orban in Hungary, and then the Kaczyński in Poland, they would like to keep everything in the hand, yes, also judiciary, and it was the beginning.
Taip. Ir aš manau, kad procesas buvo panašus Lenkijoje ir Vengrijoje, nes politiniai lyderiai, Orbanas ir Kačinskis, norėjo laikyti savo rankose viską, įskaitant teismus. Ir nuo to viskas ir prasidėjo.
Yes, so it has happened, yes, then they tried to find such an interpretation. In Hungary it was easier because there was a constitutional majority, and in Hungary they amended the constitution.
Ir toliau taip ir vyko. Vengrijoje buvo truputį lengviau, nes turėjo konstitucinę daugumą ir todėl galėjo įvesti konstitucijos pataisą.
And in Poland, some changes were made by changing interpretation to the constitution.
O Lenkijoje pokyčiai ar permainos įvesti keičiant konstitucijos interpretaciją.
Yes, and then especially the role of the Constitutional Court, because Constitutional Court should be exactly independent.
Ir ypač konstitucinio teismo vaidmenį, nes konstitucinis teismas kaip tik ir turėtų būti nepriklausomas.
When Constitutional Court is not independent, then it is an instrument in the hand of a political power, yes, and it has happened in both countries.
Ir jeigu konstitucinis teismas nėra nepriklausomas, tai jis pasidaro įrankis politinės valdžios rankose ir būtent taip nutiko abiejose šalyse.
So, and it is a problem then, as I said, in the different interpretation, yes, in the different interpretation of the Constitution and interpretation going against the European institution.
Taigi, kaip sakiau, problema yra konstitucijos interpretavimas ir tokia interpretacija, kuri prieštarauja ar eina prieš europinės institucijas.
Ačiū.
Thank you.
Norėčiau atverti klausimą jums, mėly dalyviai.
I'd like to open the floor for the audience to ask questions.
No, we discussed too much and the audience is tired. Exactly. That's it.
Sako, visi pavargę, per daug diskutuoja. O, prasideda. Ne, į mikrofoną tik tai sulauk. Bet tu jeigu paklausi angliškai, leis man išversti po to, nes aš neatsimenu.
I will try to be short on my question.
Are you from Lithuania or you are from...
I'm from Lithuania, yeah.
From Lithuania.
There were certain naiveties in early 90s.
Dešimtojo dešimtmečio pradžioje būta tam tikro naivumo.
And those naiveties, as you mentioned, were related to politics as well. That everyone in Poland, in Lithuania, other countries from Eastern Bloc, they weren't sure what's really Europe.
Ir tas naivumas buvo susijęs taip pat ir su politika Lenkijoje, Lietuvoje ir kitose rytų bloko šalyse. Politikai taip pat gerai nežinojo ar nesuprato, kas tiksliai yra Europa.
And I fully understand your basic point that there's a need of judicial supremacy.
Ir aš puikiai suprantu, ką jūs sakot, kad yra reikalingas kas? Teismų viršenybė?
Jo.
Okay.
And what?
Ai. Gerai.
Legal law.
No, because you said on what
Rule
my
of law.
point?
Yeah.
On the rule of law and judicial. No, on the rule of law.
Bet aš ir klausiu.
Jo.
Judiciary yra teismų. Ar tu turi galvoje rule of law?
Ir konstitucinio teismo, ir tada tam tikrais lygiais, žodžiu, taip.
Teisės viršenybė
Jo.
ar teismų viršenybė?
Teisės ir teismų.
Okay,
Aš nedarau
both.
skirties.
Rule of law and judiciary. Kaip čia
Yeah.
pasakyti?
But anyway, I wanted to ask, beside this particular rule, what were the naiveties in Polish society among Polish politicians and how they overcome that in 90s when they clashed with a wish for integration into European Union and other institutions of the West.
Bet aš taip pat norėčiau paklausyti, kuo dar buvo naivus Lenkų politikai, kai troško integracijos į Europos Sąjungą ir kitas vakarų struktūras?
Yeah. What were the ideas, what were the wishes for?
You know, so it is exactly still a very interesting question because we are still analyzing now probably much deeper the reaction of society in that time.
Tai tikrai labai įdomus klausimas, nes mes vis dar ir turbūt dabar juo giliau analizuojam tuometinės visuomenės reakcijas.
And as we discussed just, I think that one of the biggest problem was the collapse of expectations, because we in our part, as I said, we had probably much higher expectations concerning Europe, but what does mean higher? I will try to explain, but they were not clearly defined.
Tai kaip čia ką tik aptarėme, aš manau, kad didelė problema buvo žlugę lūkesčiai, nes mes turėjome lūkesčių apie Europą, bet jie nebuvo aiškiai apibrėžti.
We expected, as I said, that after our decision, which is a very difficult decision in our countries, especially in Poland, after a very tough program of Leszek Balcerowicz, as I said, the first non-communist government, Tadeusz Mazowiecki, and all the decisions which are taking exactly were very difficult for society, that we will be fully accepted in Europe at the same level as other European members. I can say only that then, in that time, in the beginning, we had, so I can say, Euro enthusiasm. It was very strong Euro enthusiasm in Polish society.
Tuometiniai visuomeniai buvo labai sunkus tie sprendimai, kuriuos turėjo daryti pati pirmoji nekomunistinė Lenkų vyriausybė. Aš atsiprašau, pavardžių nebeįsidėmėjau. Ir labai daug kainavo ir tam buvo pritariama iš tokio euroentuziazmo, iš to labai didelio lūkesčio, kad dabar mus greitai ir lengvai čia priims ir su džiaugsmu pasitiks.
And the Euro enthusiasm we exactly had because it was, as you said, you also put the question, we didn't very well in that time recognize Europe. Europe was a paradise for us, yes, in a very simplistic way.
Ir to entuziazmo galėjo būti tiek daug, todėl, kad mes tuo metu Europos gerai nepažinom ir mums Europa buvo toksai rojus.
Yes, and then we realized that Europe was built on a very difficult acquis communautaire, all the difficult issues which should be solved in all European countries.
Yeah. Ir tada mes supratom, kad Europa yra pastatyta ant labai sunkių klausimų, kuriuos turi išspręsti kiekviena šalis.
And then, as I can say, when we notice what difficult way is our way to Europe, the Euro enthusiasm, I said, evaporated completely.
Ir kai mes supratom, koks sunkus yra tas kelias į Europą, tai euro entuziazmas visiškai išgaravo.
Yes, evaporated and changed into I can say, Euro pessimism. We had such a stadium in our political life, yes.
Ir virto europesimizmu ir atėjo toks politinio gyvenimo etapas.
And it was a very dangerous moment in our history because when it was in the year about 2004, 2003, when we prepared ourselves with a referendum to vote to enter to the European Union, the Euro-pessimism was exactly very high.
Ir tai buvo labai pavojinga mūsų istorijos akimirka, nes tuo metu, kai mes ruošėmės balsuoti referendume 2003 ar 2004 metais, europesimizmas kaip tik buvo labai išaugęs.
We are not sure if referendum will bring positive effect or negative effect. We were in such a situation.
Padėtis buvo tokia, kad nebuvom tikri, ar referendumas atneš teigiamą ar neigiamą poveikį.
And then great help offered us, as very often, John Paul II.
O tada didžiąją viltį, kaip ne vieną kartą iki to mums suteikė Jonas Paulius II.
Yes, because the Polish pilgrimage to Vatican in May 2003, Pope John Paul II said openly, as we remember, from the square St. Peter, that the European Union needs Poland and Poland needs European Union.
Nes 2003 metų gegužę Lenkų piligrimams jisai viešai Švento Petro aikštėje pasakė, kad Lenkijai reikia Europos Sąjungos ir Europos Sąjungai reikia Lenkijos.
And then I can say referendum was done in positive way and we entered to the road which I can describe now as kind of euro-realism. Not euro-enthusiasm, not euro-pessimism, but a kind of euro-realism, yes.
Ir tada referendume buvo nubalsuota teigiamai ir mes žengėme tuo keliu, kurį dabar būtų galima apibūdinti kaip tokį eurorealizmą, nebe entuziazmą ir nebe pesimizmą, bet tokį tikrovišką požiūrį.
But exactly, it was very frustrated for us when we waited so long for being accepted as a member of the European Union, and we started in 1989, and finally we were accepted in 2004. It was rather a long period for us. And I remember when Jacques Chirac came to Polish Parliament and he said that Poland will be in European Union in 2000. We expected it, but it was unrealistic. Yes, we have to wait 4 years more.
Ir mums kėlė didelę frustraciją tas procesas, kad užtruko labai ilgai įstoti į Europos Sąjungą. Pradėjom 1989. 80. Ir tada, o įstojom galiausiai tik 2004. Ir Žakas Širakas buvo atvykęs į Lenkiją ir parlamente sakė, kad Lenkija įstos į Europos Sąjungą iki 2000-ųjų, bet tai buvo nerealistiška.
Because we didn't realize, we could not even realize how deep, how big was the gap between our economy and Western economy. And it was exactly a big, reason for the frustration in Polish society. Our expectations were much higher, I will repeat, than the realistic, situation in our country.
Bet tai mūsų buvo nerealistiškas įsivaizdavimas, kokio dydžio yra atotrukis tarp mūsų ekonomikos ir Europos Sąjungos ekonomikos. Ir tai ir kėlė tas frustracijas, tai kad reikėjo tokius didelius tos skirtumus peržengti.
Yes, European Union keeps very strongly the rules. And now I can say, yes, because, we can observe now the situation with Ukraine. Ukraine is now in a similar way, yes, because there are high expectations, because of the war, because of the enormous effort what the nation in Ukraine is doing, yes, against Russia, try to defend Europe, I can say. But we also know it very well now, we member of the European Union, what difficult and tough are the rules in European Union, and how difficult it is to accept the economic system of Ukraine in European Union. Yes.
Europos Sąjungoje labai griežtai laikomasi taisyklių ir dabar tą patį galim matyti Ukrainos atžvilgiu, kur irgi žmonių lūkesčiai yra labai dideli ir dėl karo, ir dėl to tokio idėjinio jausmo, kaip čia Ukraina gina Europą nuo Rusijos, bet kartu, kaip čia pasakyti, ta europinė tvarka, mes dabar patys būdami viduje Europos Sąjungos galim matyti, kad ta europinė tvarka yra griežta ir rimta ir sudėtinga ir nėra taip paprasta, lengvai ir greitai dabar integruoti Ukrainos ekonomiką į Europos struktūrą.
No, yes, so I think I will not be able to answer every question, but I only share my own impression, yes, because I also, as it has been said, Prime Minister, I notice the relations in different ways than then when I was a Minister of Justice, and then I was an ambassador to the Holy See when Poland entered to the European Union, and I was witness of the discussion with Pope and other politicians concerning our role. So now, from this perspective, more than 30 years, I see how difficult was the way to the European Union. But I would like to strongly support that it was worse to went the way and to be in the European Union. Yes, so it is important.
Aš negaliu atsakyti jūsų klausimą, galiu pasidalinti tik tai asmeniniais įspūdžiais, bet aš buvau finansų ministrė tuo metu ir paskui buvau ambasadorė prie šventojo Sosto, kaip tik tuo laiku, kai Lenkija įstojo Europos Sąjungą ir dalyvavau tose diskusijose su popiežium. Ir dabar iš 30 metų perspektyvos, tai labai gerai matau, kaip sunku tai buvo, bet kartu dabar galiu pasakyti, kad tikrai buvo verta.
Ačiū klausimą.
Sveiki, ačiū už įdomius pamąstymus diskusijai.
Thank you for your interesting considerations for discussion.
Mano klausimas būtų labiau iš teisės teorijos perspektyvos.
My question is more from the perspective of the theory of law.
Jūs minėjote apie konstitucinio teismo nepriklausomumo principo pažeidimo pavojų.
You have mentioned the danger of not following the principle of the independence of the constitutional court.
Violation of that principle. Bet mes žinome, kad konstitucinė doktrina
But we know that the constitutional doctrine
formuoja ne tik pati konstitucija ir konstituciniai įstatymai,
is shaped not only by constitution and constitutional law,
bet ir konstitucinio teismo oficialūs išaiškinimai.
but also
Tikslaus termino nepasakysiu.
What?
but also by for official commentary by the constitutional court.
Ir mes turime praktinės situacijas, kai konstitucinis teismas tampa tokiu politiniu įrankiu, kaip jūs minėjot.
So we do have the practical situations where the constitutional court becomes a sort of political tool, like you have mentioned.
Tai ir Vengrija, ir Janukovičiaus laikų Ukraina, ir Moldova.
So that's Hungary and Ukraine during Yanukovych rule and Moldova.
Ir taip pat mes žinom, kad konstitucinio teismo išaiškinimus gali keisti tik pats konstitucinis teismas.
And we also know that the interpretations of the constitutional court can only be altered by the constitutional court itself.
Ir tokiose situacijose, kur jūs matytumėt praktinį sprendimą, kaip pavyzdžiui po tokio nedemokratinio laikotarpio yra atstatomas konstitucinio teismo nepriklausomumas.
So how would you see a practical solution, or what a practical solution could be in such situations where after a period of non-democratic rule, the independence of the constitutional court is re-established?
Ar tokiu atveju konstitucinis teismas turėtų aktyviai užsiimti buvusios praktikos revizavimu?
Should the constitutional court in such a situation be actively engaged in revisioning the former practice?
Ir jeigu jūs matote tame procese tokius pavojus, tai irgi būtų įdomu, jeigu įvardytumėt.
And if you can see perils in such a process, it would also be interesting to hear what they could be.
Thank you so much, but it is exactly how to say question for the next lecture, and we don't have time. But you know,
Labai ačiū už klausimą, bet čia kaip tik yra tema kitai paskaitai.
Because you know, it is exactly the time when we have the discussion in the country, in Poland, yes, when we try to answer the question you put at the moment.
Nes kaip žinot, dabar Lenkijoje kaip tik ir yra tokia situacija ir mes diskutuojam, bandydami atsakyti kaip tik į tokį klausimą, kokį čia uždavėt.
Because you know, our system, exactly, especially Polish system, was built since the beginning on the perception of the very strong role of the constitutional court.
Nes kaip žinot, mūsų sistema nuo pat pradžių buvo surasta remiantis labai stipriu konstitucinio teismo vaidmeniu.
And for that reason, in our constitution, sometimes we are very, how to say, limited to the expressions, to the regulations, because it has been left to the role of the constitutional court.
Ir todėl kai kuriais atvejais mūsų konstitucija kaip tik yra labai ribota, labai ribotai kalba apie konkretybės, nes viskas yra palikta konstituciniams teismui.
So for that reason, it was so important to have pluralistic, independent constitutional court.
Dėl to buvo labai svarbu suburti pluralistinį, nepriklausomą konstitucinį teismą.
And it was possible in 2015. Always the parties, different parties, respected pluralistic election to the constitutional court.
Ir tai buvo įmanoma iki 2015. Visos partijos gerbė tos pluralistinius rinkimus į Konstitucinį teismą.
They were representatives proposed by different political groups, political parties in the Constitutional Court, yes?
Konstitucinėme teisme buvo reprezentuojamos skirtingos politinės partijos ir grupės.
First time the rule has been broken in 2015.
Pirmą kartą taisyklė sulaužyta 2015.
It was not legal change of the 3 members elected by previous parliament and then replaced by others.
Praėjus ankstesnio parlamento išrinkti 3 nariai buvo neteisėtai pakeisti kitais.
And now is a question, how we can change it, yes? Because now we have a situation when the president who is representing the different political party, he has power to block all every law passed by the parliament.
Todėl dabar turime atsakinėti tą klausimą, nes prezidentas turi galę nublokuoti bet kurį įstatymą priimta parlamento.
Yes, and then now the Minister of Justice proposed the new solution to the Constitutional Court, but of course the solutions are not signed by the President, because the changes to the law are blocked by the President, not changed, yes?
Ir dabar teisingumo ministras siūlo išeiti Konstituciniam teismui, bet prezidentas blokuoja, nes ta išeitis ne tokia, kaip jis norėtų.
So they prepared several of laws which would like to change the situation, but they are not. It is not possible to give them power because there is no signature by president. Power to the law, yes, on constitution, for example, some changes to the Constitutional Court law.
Yra parengti keli įstatymai, bet neįmanoma jiems įsigalioti, nes yra per gerai veikia tas blokavimo mechanizmas.
And so far as we have this composition of the Constitutional Court, nothing could be changed, because the president is also sending a draft to the law on the law to the Constitutional Court, and the Constitutional Court is making political opinion, yes?
Ir su dabartinės sudėties Konstituciniu teismu nieko neįmanoma padaryti, nes prezidentas siunčia įstatymo projektus Konstituciniam teismui, o Konstitucinis teismas jam duoda politinius patarimus.
And now we can see in practice in Poland how important is exactly the principle, as I mentioned before, the loyal cooperation between state organs. Because otherwise, now I can say that we have in the Polish system not separation of power, but we have system of blockade of power, because the government is blockaded by the president in making laws, and not everything could be changed by acts which are subordinated to the law. Yes, so it must be done by law.
Ir dabar Lenkijoje matom gerą pavyzdį, kaip sunku, koks svarbus yra tas principas, kurį minėjau pranešime, tokio lojalaus bendradarbiavimo tarp skirtingų valdžios institucijų, nes dabar vietoj to lojalaus bendradarbiavimo veikia nublokavimo principas ir neįmanoma priimti įstatymo, prezidentas blokuoja vyriausybės iniciatyvas, vyriausybės įstatymus. Ir neįmanoma to išjudinti.
So now we can see very clearly that the law could be very weak when we have a very determined political authoritarian thinking, and then the law is only instrument in the end. So now we have a series of draft of laws prepared by the new government, especially Minister of Justice, but they are waiting room for the political changes, because there is no other movement. There are also opinions of the Venice Commission, what should be done, but the law is still, the draft of laws are still, keeping by the president.
Ir mes turim net nemažai parengtų įstatymų, kurie palikti laukti už durų, kol ateis geresni laikai politiškai, nes yra, įstatymai yra pajungti politiniai valdžiai ir nieko ir taip pat Venecijos komisijos patarimai irgi yra taip pat užblokuoti, neįgyvendami.
So now answering your question, I am very sure that I didn't answer your question, but I only share with you our problems and doubts we face now in Poland, as we would like to, revital the Constitutional Court to bring him to the normal action, yes, as a guardian of law.
Tai aš esu tikra, kad neatsakiau į jūsų klausimą, bet bent jau pasidalinau mūsų problemomis ir rūpesčiais, kaip tik apie tokią situaciją, kai reikia vėl grąžinti konstitucinį teismą į normalų funkcionavimą.
I don't know. So I think that it was everything what I could say here. I think that we probably explore our time. Yes. I don't know.
Ačiū. Tuo baigsime diskusiją. Thank you for your interesting lecture and for answering all those difficult questions.
No, trying to answer difficult questions. Thank you so much.